Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. So today we're going to talk about one-tricking in Wild Rift. Should you one-trick? How should your champion pool be developed? Things like this. So I'm just going to start off again. This is going to be one video where I kind of just talk through a lot of things, a lot of my different thoughts on it. Initially, kind of my experiences with one-tricking. So for my general attempts on climbing in various seasons, for those who don't know, I kind of tried to get challenger on every role at some point. I think I did this. I finished it about 6 to 9 months ago. I ended up getting, my last role. And every time that I would, try to play on a new role, I would find that I had the most success when I stuck to a very small champion pool. For example, for ADC, Varus and Corki were the main two champions that I climbed with. For mid lane, I pretty much just one-trick Jace. For top lane, the first time that I got it, I played Fiora, Wukong, and Renekton top lane. For support, I played mostly Thresh and some Rakan as well. And for jungle, I played pretty much only Camille jungle for the start. And I pretty much have always found that when I stick to too many champions, it's really, really difficult for me to climb. And I usually have a much quicker and better experience with climbing when I actually one-trick, or at least stick to a very small amount of champions. Now, this is obviously all anecdotal experience, and that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for you. But there are some reasons that I think, generally speaking, one-tricking is really valuable. And I'm going to speak on the benefits, and then I'll talk about what I feel like is also not as good and the drawbacks to it. So the first thing is you have a limited amount of time every season to climb and to learn things, especially for those who don't. Obviously I stream, so I do have the luxury of being able to play this game a lot more than most of you probably do. I know everyone, you guys have lives, you're busy with stuff. And when you say you only play 200-300 games a season, if you spend that time playing 10 different champions, that means you're going to get like 20 to 30 game average per champion. That's just not very much time to understand the intricacies of a champion. Whereas say that you just played maybe 2 champions, even just 1 champion, you're getting 1, 2, 300 games on that champion a season, where you can very quickly understand everything about the champ. Because, right, say there's 20 common top lane matchups, for example, and you're a top laner, and you play 300 games. You're getting to play all those matchups like 10 or 20 times, so you can actually learn a lot about them. Whereas if you're playing, a top laner only 10 games, 20 games, you literally only play that matchup once or twice, and you're still not going to actually really know how to win in that matchup. And it's going to be very hard to learn because, again, you just have limited time. So it's just a more efficient use of your time, in my opinion, to just one trick. Additionally, again, like I kind of spoke about, you understand matchups on your champions much better. So you're going to know how to play even in bad matchups. For example, I'm honestly more confident playing Jace in the Malphite than I am playing Renekton in the Malphite, despite me being decent at Renekton, because I'm just way better at Jace. And so even though Malphite is Jace's hardest counter, I can play this matchup so well that I still think I'm going to beat most Malphites not only in lane, but also outperform them outside of lane, despite the matchup being negative. So there's definitely a lot of positives to it. You can understand, the matchups, you understand all of these types of things. But another big thing is understanding how to actually win on your champion, which I think is a very underrated aspect of the game. After only like 100 games of Jace, I already knew how to win lane really good because he's a very good laner. I could already play the game on this champion pretty effectively. That wasn't the issue. The issue was I didn't know what to do, how to actually snowball a game and win once I had this huge gold lead, because I didn't understand how to play the champion. Just like recently I've been learning Viego, I'm able to get really big leads on Viego, but because I just don't have as much experience in this champion as I do on some others, I have a hard time carrying my teams when I get this big gold leads because I just don't have enough experience in these team fights into, I haven't made enough mistakes on this champion to really understand what I need to do differently and how I can truly carry the game. Whereas if I play Jace, anytime that I have a gold lead, I've already been in that situation where maybe I'm in a gold lead and I'm against a lot of tanks and I need to be like, okay, I need to change my build in this way. I need to make sure I'm playing on side lane in this game. I need to really make the, draw them to me. I want to play around side lanes. I don't want to play around team fighting. And then a different game, I'm going to be against a bunch of squishy champions. I'm going to have a lead. I'm going to know exactly how to play that. I'm going to know how to play from behind. I just know how to play in every scenario. And I think that's immensely valuable. And so again, those are a lot of the biggest things about one-tricking. Now, there's obviously more to the game than just winning. And so a lot of people would say that it's less fun to play into one trick, and I can understand the sentiment because I do get bored sometimes playing the same champions over and over again. But there's a couple things to combat this. The first would be, generally speaking, it's really satisfying to know something perfectly and understand it better than other people. And so I get a lot of satisfaction from being able to really perform on any individual champion super well, and obviously one tricking allows me to do that. But some people, again, they get bored of doing the same thing over and over again. They like to switch it up. And for those people, I totally understand not wanting to one trick, and it's not for everyone. Some people just don't enjoy that. And that's like a completely understandable reason for why you would not want to one trick, for example. Okay, so now I'm going to get into a lot more of the negatives, and then we'll kind of come to a conclusion at the end of the video. So one big thing that's really important is that you can get countered. And sure, like I said, there's definitely the understanding of how to beat a counter, but some champions, they just suck in certain matchups so much that it's nearly unplayable. Like some champs just can't play certain matchups. They're just maybe really bad into tanks, really bad into assassins, whatever, right? They're just certain champs that you just can't really just completely one trick because it's going to be extremely hard without getting countered, and it's also frustrating to play into counters. And this is one of the main negatives for playing, which is, again, you either have to acknowledge that you're going to understand how to play into the counters, you're going to get really good at it, or you do find 2 or 3 other champions to play. Which also takes me to like choosing the actual champion to one trick. You shouldn't one trick a champion who is super easy to counter and only good in certain niche scenarios, because this champion is going to be extremely hard to climb on in comparison. So for example, one of my one tricks, because I kind of have, you know, you guys know I play autofill, so I do have one tricks in different lanes, and also I've one tricked in different seasons, different champions. For example, used to one trick Camille jungle, recently been kind of one tricking Vi jungle. So you don't have to always stick to a one trick permanently. It can be a temporary thing where you just really stick to it for, say, a season or two. But anyways, kind of back to the point. Certain champions like Vi is pretty much good in every scenario. She's tanky, she does good damage, she has good clear speed, she's super versatile. Varus, good laning, can scale pretty well, can build into tanks differently, can build into squishies. Jace also can build differently. He's a bit worse into tanks and has a bit harder matchups, but he's a champion who has that super hard carry potential that kind of makes up for it. So a lot of my one tricks are champions who just naturally are decent for one tricking because they're pretty versatile, pretty good in a variety of situations. And another thing for one tricking too, you should one trick based on a champ that's actually like good for carrying games. For example, I don't really recommend one tricking Lulu, even though she's super strong, because she just can't have a high enough impact where it's like, you can only learn so much about playing Lulu, right? Like there's not that much to learn where it's like, what's the point in one tricking her? Which also brings me to another point. I don't think every role should one trick in the same way. For example, one tricking in support, I don't think is the most valuable thing, because a lot of supports are very easy to play. And so if a lot of supports are very easy to play, then picking for team comp is going to be more valuable oftentimes, because these champions, they really rely on synergies with their ADCs, for example, with the rest of their team, and really playing around their team. Again, even in support, though, there are certain champions that are good for one tricking. For example, in my opinion, Thresh is a versatile champion that you can one trick. So not only is it based on, you know, whether or not your champion is specifically a good one trick, but also whether or not your role is a good one trick. Because again, certain roles are just better and worse. For example, in top lane, you don't really want to one trick a champion who has a lot of counters, but you would want to one trick a champion who's really good as a blind pick, such as, for example, Renekton. And so I think all of these things are important to keep in mind when you're deciding whether or not to one trick, what champion, what role to one trick in. And I also want to mention, I'm not literally saying to purely one trick. You should understand how to play some other champions too. It's not like you actually need to play all 400 of, say you play 400 games a season. Those 400 games don't need to be on one champion. You can have like 200 games on your main champion, then say like 150, you know, on some other champions. So in certain matchups, you can play these other champs. You don't just have to literally blind pick and get counterpicked every single time you're playing your one trick. I just think generally that the point is, I feel it's more valuable to get better on a niche amount of champions, a small amount of champions, as long as they do fit these certain categories I described of you know, them fitting in a variety of scenarios and these certain roles, this type of thing. And so if you do really enjoy a champion who, or multiple champions even, who have, you know, a lot more counters, then one tricking may not be for you, which is why I really want to, you know, again, acknowledge it's unique to the individual person. I'm not necessarily saying one thing is definitely better or worse than the other, but a lot of these benefits from one tricking are very valuable and are going to allow you to climb a lot quicker. It's going to simplify your climb. It's going to allow you to also focus on other things, which again, you can focus more on the macro part of the game when you understand a champion well. You're not thinking about the mechanics, about what button you have to click, all these types of things, because you've done it hundreds, if not thousands of times. And so you've been in all these scenarios, you already know what to do, and so you can autopilot the mechanical part of the game while really focusing on the more, you know, decision-making macro part of the game, which to me is a much more valuable part of Wild Rift and a much more important thing to understand. And so if you're able to kind of simplify that experience, I think you definitely should try to. But again, not only that, just some people, they don't enjoy one tricking. There's a variety of reasons as to why you may not want to do it, or as to why you may want to do it. To kind of conclude here overall, I'm not saying that you necessarily have to one trick in order to succeed or to climb, but playing a small amount of champions and potentially one tricking if your champions and your rules are up for it and kind of fit it, you know, well, I would say it's going to be a little bit simpler and easier to one trick rather than playing a lot of champions. But some people, they just, you know, they feel suited to different types of playstyles, playing more champions. They maybe like counterpicking a lot more. All of these different types of things are going to come into account when you're deciding whether or not to one trick, and I just thought it'd be an interesting video. If you guys have opinions on one tricking, let me know in the comments. If you guys have one tricks, let me know what your one tricks or your main champions are in Wild Rift. And yeah, I think that's going to about do it for the video. As always, I'm a Sovereign Rank 5 autofill player, and I do coaching for $15 an hour, so just DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description in my YouTube, and I'm always down to coach people. Apart from that, I'll see you guys later.